on this episode of the Brothers Mysterium.
When people go to a medium, they're looking for a direction.
Which is why I have what I call the Harry Houdini test.
You know, I've got a father who passed, and she goes, oh, I know, Anthony.
Because in a way, you're resurrecting these people who have died.
So she goes, his father, Joseph, he's coming through.
Thinking I'd be sneaky and pull one over on them and being like, you can't cold read me.
Oh my goodness, this is crazy.
That's right, today we're talking with the dead, delving into mediums and communing with those who have passed. Let's do it. My brother and I have always been intrigued by the unexplainable. Like many, we're fascinated with stories of the supernatural, fringe science, and modern-day mysteries.
Though we've seen no first-hand proof of its existence, our minds remain open to the possibility.
Unsatisfied with the so-called evidence on television and the internet, we are choosing to take matters into our own hands and conduct our own interviews and research.
Now we're on a quest to speak with as many people as we can and hear the stories of these events from those who have lived them.
No Hollywood effects or exaggerations, and no hidden agenda. We invite you to listen and decide what and who you believe.
We are the Brothers Mysterium.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Brothers Mysterium. I am Tommy, along with my brother Eric.
Heyo.
Today on the show, we got something a little different. It's going to be a discussion on mediums, people with the ability to speak with the dead.
Or claim to.
Interesting point you made. I'd say on a scale of a lot to a little, I believe in them a medium amount. Medium, which is a pun, but it's also kind of how I feel. I could go either way. What are your thoughts?
When you start to consider supernatural events, the idea of mediums and communicating with the dead kind of takes on a different sentimentality when you compare it to other paranormal events. It definitely hits a lot harder because in a way, you're resurrecting these people who have died, people that you knew and loved very deeply and closely. That idea really packs a punch. And as far as like spirit communication and communicating with the dead goes, I'm not completely sold on the idea. I did have some friends in college who would go see psychics and get psychic readings in these funny kind of storefront type places. And I always thought it was a little strange. But I've always had a curiosity about them because I always wanted to go into one of these places and kind of give them nothing to work with and prevent them from being able to cold read me, which is the phrase that's commonly used. And for those of you who don't know what cold reading is, I remember the show South Park not only spoofing this perfectly, but also explaining it very clearly. Pretty much when cold reading, a psychic or a medium collects very general information about you and then makes very vague statements to you.
Okay, watch. All I'm going to do is say a name that I'm going to pick at random, okay? They want me to acknowledge Pete or Peter.
Yes, my Peter.
And then gauge your reactions in order to make them more and more specific.
Now that I see that there is a lone woman crying, my instinct tells me Peter was her husband. So I say, Peter was your husband?
Yes, my husband Peter. Whoa.
So you think that they're actually communicating or knowing things about you.
You knew Peter was dead!
I didn't start by saying Peter is dead. I started by saying they want me to acknowledge Peter. That could have meant Peter was in the audience or that Peter was somebody's friend or Peter had died. I couldn't be wrong, see? Now, I can look at this woman and see that she's fairly young. So odds are her husband was fairly young when he died. So I can say something like, I'm getting that Peter's death was very untimely.
Yes, it was.
Oh, amazing!
Ask Peter if he knows my little Billy.
Okay, let's back up. Not literally.
So I always wanted to go into one of these places and give them nothing and see what they could do with that.
Now, you've brought up two interesting points. One is I've always wanted to go into a psychic medium and say, did you know I was coming? But besides that, now there's a separation here between a psychic and a medium.
Right. Okay.
A medium can speak with the dead, supposedly.
Right.
A psychic is supposed to have precognitive abilities and can use tarot cards or whatever.
Yeah.
Predict your future and have clairvoyance. But
both. Okay, good.
I was going to say, but a lot of them now are both, where they say I'm a psychic medium.
Okay. Right.
So I don't know. Is there a difference, or is that is it if you have the ability to do one, if you can see the future, can you also commune with those who have passed, or is there a separation? I don't really know. I don't know much about them. As I've said, I've never been to a psychic medium, or a psychic. But we should go to one at some point and record it for this show.
That would be,
throw that out now.
Yeah. I do believe, okay, so you said there's the mediums, there's psychics, and then there's the psychic medium. Both, I think, have the ability or do use cold reading in their practices. Yeah, I don't think I am a believer. I think it's mostly a sham. I may have my mind changed today. We shall see.
Here's where I stand. I've watched Long Island Medium, and it's an interesting show, and Teresa Caputo is an interesting person, but it's television. I feel like a lot of it is staged. You have to book her months in advance, and they can like look up info about you or whatever, like you said about cold readings. With Facebook and everything, they can find stuff out. But there are certain things on the show, at least, where suddenly, you know, she'll say, like, is there a male who passed? Oh, yeah, my dad. And it's kind of generic things. And like, you know, every psychic I see on TV does that, where they start vague and it gets more and more, and they kind of let the person lead them to where they want to be. But then they'll say something like, what is Snowflake? And then the person cries and goes, oh my God, that was his nickname for me. Which is why I have what I call the Harry Houdini test.
With the spotlight of the public on Houdini, with the whole world paused to see or hear Houdini step on this side of the curtain. Now let us bow our heads in meditation and prayer. O thou mastermind of the universe.
For those of you who know, Harry Houdini was completely against the spiritualistic movement, spiritualism.
Right.
He said it was a sham. He said mediums were a sham. So he had his wife, Bess, they had a secret code word in case one of them died, and obviously Houdini died first. So then for 10 years, Bess Houdini would, on Halloween, hold a seance, have, you know, the top mediums there.
Please now, the time is at hand. Make yourself known to us. Any of you, please, manifest yourself in any way possible. Please let your united strength and knowledge aid Houdini in coming through. It is the spirit of Houdini we wish to contact. Houdini, are you here? Are you here?
And they would make the, oh, I feel his presence, whatever. And Bess would say, okay, does he have a message for me, whatever.
Bessie is here. Your Bessie, who was part of you for 33 years. She's here, Harry, pleading in her heart for a prearranged sign. Speak, Harry. We are watching and waiting, Harry. Levitate the table. Move it. Lift the table. Move it. Rap on it. Spell out a code, Harry. Please.
And after 10 years of nobody getting what this code word was, she said, okay, I don't believe it. Enough, you know, it's over. He's dead. You can't communicate with him. It's done.
Mrs. Houdini, the 0 hour has passed. The 10 years are up. Have you reached a decision?
Yes. Houdini did not come through. My last hope is gone. I do not believe that Houdini can come back to me or to anyone. After faithfully following through the 10-year Houdini compact, using every type of medium and seance, it is now my personal and positive belief that spirit communication in any form is impossible. I do not believe that ghosts or spirits exist. The Houdini shrine has burned for 10 years. I now reverently turn out the light. It is finished. Good night, Harry.
So the only way I could really believe it is, first of all, me and you should come up with off the air. Should come up with a secret code word in case one of us dies to carry this over.
You never know.
But it's like I'm going to need that firsthand account of, you know, someone saying something to me that they could not in any way know.
Right. Nothing vague or ambiguous.
Right. It's got to be spot on.
Spot on. Right.
Is the only thing that would convince me. But I've never been to one.
And Harry Houdini actually also used to go to like seances and readings where people would claim to contact the dead and disguise himself, and would then like indulge the people who were doing the reading by saying like, yes, my son Jimmy, yes, how is my son Jimmy? And then at the end it would say like, you dumbass, I'm Harry Houdini, I don't have a son named Jimmy. And apparently he pissed off a lot of people who were very into the spiritualist movement. One of them, who I believe was actually Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote the Sherlock Holmes series.
That is correct. They were good friends, and it kind of ripped their friendship apart.
Yeah.
That's the good thing about this show. You get a little bit of history and a little bit of mystery. We deliver it all.
Oh.
But as we said, coming up will be a guest of ours who's a user of mediums, a real strong believer, and he's a personal friend. So what he says will hold some weight. We'll see if he can sort of change our minds. And I feel like there's a lot of, I don't know, like I said, I could go either way. I'm a little wishy-washy. I'd like to believe it, but without that firsthand account, I've seen a lot of bad mediums. I don't know if you know who Sylvia Brown is.
Oh, yeah.
Who I feel like was just always wrong. She was sort of like the...
yeah, she's always very wrong.
She was like the Al Sharpton of mediums, where she was just popping anything. And I remember there was a 9/11 clip on a talk show where a woman is like, oh, my husband died. And Sylvia Brown goes, oh, yeah, he drowned. And she's like, no, he died in 9/11. And she goes... yeah, maybe a hose turned on him and he drowned in the hose.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
She also predicted that the girl in those Amanda Berry from the Cleveland kidnappings, where the famous guy was like...
this one I think I heard, yeah.
I knew something was wrong when a little pretty white girl ran into a black man's arms. Something is wrong here. Dead giveaway. Dead giveaway.
Charles, thank you very much.
Yeah.
That guy, she did a famous... reading.
She is in Sylvia Brown.
Think I'll ever see her again? Yeah, in heaven on the other side.
Where she said Amanda Berry's dead. She's by a river. I'm 100% positive. And obviously Amanda Berry was alive.
Help me, I'm Amanda Berry.
I'm like, I'm calling the 911 for Amanda Berry. I thought this girl was dead.
I feel like it's just kind of a scam to make money. They claim that they can do this. And I think a lot of it too is people want to believe, you're upset. People want to have the comfort of knowing there is an afterlife, there's a heaven.
People like their illusions.
Exactly. And people will believe what they want. And especially, I never got into a medium. I've never had the urge. Nobody was ever taken from me suddenly. And I felt like they needed to tell me a message or deliver. There was something left unsaid I needed closure on. If I went, I feel like I'd just be like, so does anybody want to talk to me? And the medium would be like, no.
Yeah.
So it's like those people that go are like, I would just want to hear from, my cousin or whatever. I feel like how much of it is them just wanting it so bad that they believe it.
Right. Yeah. Another plug for something, if you're into this whole thing, there's another movie, I think it's called The Awakening, which I saw on Netflix, which is about a woman who attempts to debunk the spiritualist movement, and then a crazy story ensues. So if you're looking for a good flick on the subject, check that out as well. Is it a documentary or just... No, it takes place in I believe the late 19th century, early 20th century. It's a drama. It's a film.
Cool. And then one final story that I'll always remember: when I was in high school, there was a jailbreak, and a little person, a dwarf, had escaped, and he claimed he was a psychic. And I'll never forget the headline: "Small medium at large," which is one of my favorite medium jokes.
The Brothers Mysterium.
My family actually has a little bit of a background with mediums, in the sense that we're not shy to use them.
This is Bert, and if you haven't guessed by now, he has a lot of experience with mediums. I've known him virtually his entire life, and I knew if there was one person who could give us a real, straight, honest account about mediums, it was him.
So essentially, going back actually to 1993, when my father passed away, my mom actually got in touch with John Edward.
I know what you're thinking. Senator John Edwards can talk to dead people? Well, he can't. That's a different guy. So who is John Edward? Well, according to his website,
for the last 3 decades, psychic medium John Edward has been helping people connect with their loved ones on the other side. John is a tireless warrior for the work and lectures and tours the world to teach people that life and love are eternal.
Who nobody really knew about at the time. He was very young. He lived out in Long Island, and he actually had basically an office in his house. So now, as we know, he's, been touring all over the country. I think he's actually made world visits. He's got books, magazines, the whole 9 yards.
Television shows.
On this, Crossing Over. Welcome to Crossing Over. I'm John Edward. I have somebody's father who's coming through, who's telling me to talk about, they either had lung cancer or they had something that I would see as being pulmonary related.
So if you haven't seen the show, John Edward is sort of the stereotypical medium. He stands in front of a large group of people. He'll kind of make these claims. I'm getting a G name. I'm seeing a man. I'm seeing a woman. Did someone pass from something in the chest? He then engages the crowd and proceeds to read them, speak with their loved ones. Now, this is important because group readings will come up in parts 2 and 3 of our conversation with Bert.
You know that? There's a little girl in that section. I think she was either in a vehicle accident or somebody was a younger female passed in a car accident right where you're standing.
So this was a pre-famous.
This was pre-famous.
Wow.
Yeah, this is going back in the day. So my mom went to him and he was very accurate. And so he kind of got, of course, naturally became, John Edward as we know him today, and you can no longer reach him. So I don't think he can be reached. I think he's more or less kind of somebody who just does the shows and doesn't do the private readings, so to speak.
Right, he's moved on to bigger.
He's moved on to bigger things.
You got to move. You got to go to the other side if you want to reach him now.
That's exactly it. That's right. That's right. That's your
one
access.
way to do it.
So my take on mediums is this. I think people really reach out to them when a relative has passed, a relative might be passing, somebody's very sick, or they're at kind of a crossroads in their life. I don't feel like anybody goes to a medium just for entertainment purposes. Kind of like, hey, we go to a comedy show or something to that effect. I think it's somebody who's maybe in a bad way, so to speak, or looking for answers, really. And I think that the main thing about going to a medium is that you have to be completely open to it. I think if you go in there with a spirit of trying to decompartmentalize everything that's going on and dissect it too much, and you're too much of a skeptic, you're not going to get anything from it.
So at this point in Bert's story, it's 2009. He's a 19-year-old kid, and he's got the same stuff every 19-year-old kid does on his mind.
I was in college. I'm looking towards a career path after college.
Except there's one major difference between what's on Bert's mind as compared to the average 19-year-old.
I'm also looking to reach out to my father. So I'm like, where do I go? So sure enough, my mom is actually in town going to, I guess, the CVS or someplace in town. And she runs into a family friend who happens to mention that she's going down to the shore to go to a psychic show. And it's a Cindy Lane Newcomb, who no one really knows about. She's kind of underground.
Okay.
I've never heard that name. Though.
Yeah, it's shocking to me because, as I would later find out, she is extremely accurate. More accurate than I would say John Edward.
Okay.
And I'll explain that further. But so it was almost like one of those things that's kind of meant to be. So I had a horrendous time trying to get a hold of the Cindy Lane Newcomb. She's actually was based in Penn Yan, New York, which is essentially out in
Never even heard
sticks.
of it. Yeah, so it sounds like it's...
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to get there other than either, I think you have to be blindfolded and somebody takes you there and something to that effect. So I guess I got the number from the family friend and I was trying to set up a reading.
So after many, many attempts, Bert is finally able to get in contact with Cindy Lane Newcomb's secretary. The secretary says it's possible to set up an appointment on September 7th.
And I said, I can do that. I'm home from college for Labor Day weekend.
The secretary tells Bert she's available at 10 a.m.
I said, all right.
And that's when Bert finds out there's a few caveats to this whole reading thing.
Now, I was a little suspicious because the reading was, you could do a reading either in person or via telephone. And when I see a telephone thing, I think of Miss Cleo from that Jamaican lady.
Yeah. Call me up, I'll tell you what you want to know.
Who asked you to go out of town? The stupid young one or the married one? The married one. That's what I thought. Don't go, you hear me? Don't go blindly through life. Let me use the power of the tarot to show you the way. Call me now for your free reading.
Call 1-800-65.
And you're like, okay, this has got to be crap. So it was $100 for 60 minutes. And I'm like, okay, that's relatively cheap for a 60-minute session.
Right.
So I'm like, and how accurate can this be over the phone?
The secretary then informs Bert that he must now send a check to this secret random-ass location somewhere in New York.
At this point, I'm like, I don't know if this is going to work out.
Sounds a little fishy.
And he also, which sounds even shadier, wants me to send pictures of myself. Of course, everything not, G-rated.
Right.
And family members or anybody else I'm interested in kind of getting a sense of read on ahead of time. And I said, okay, I can do that.
So despite his reservation, Bert does decide he's going to send in the check, certified, of course, so he can track its progress but he opts not to send any photos. A little bit of time goes by. He doesn't hear anything. And then
3 weeks out from my actual reading, I get this phone call from this New York State number on my cell phone. I'm like, I got to answer this. And that's like 8:30 in the morning. And I go, hello. And I go, Cindy. I went, Cindy? She goes, Cindy Lane Newcomb. I went, oh my goodness. I'm like, Cindy, I'm like, hi, I'm, nice to meet you. And I'm like, what's going on? And she goes, so what did she say to me? She goes, did you just send me a certified letter? And I go, I did. And she goes, okay. She goes, I'm a little nervous anytime I see something certified. I'm like, okay, this sounds shady as it is.
Yeah.
I didn't say that to her, but, and she says, well, I have, she goes, I was wondering if I was getting sued. And I said, why do you wonder that? She goes, well, I had somebody here about a week ago who, after they were talking to me, they went to jump off a bridge.
Yikes. So they got some bad news delivered.
They got some bad news delivered.
What they wanted to hear.
And I said, okay, well, I hope it doesn't come to that for me. And I also said,
reasonable
and I said, I also, I want to let you know that, that was just me sending my check. I said, I want to make sure it got to you. She goes, okay. She goes, I know that, Andre, who was the secretary, she goes, mentioned that you were looking forward to seeing me. And she goes, tell me something. She goes, who's the guy with the BMW? And I go, I said, that would be my grandfather. He is a BMW. She goes, okay. She goes, okay, so his father's coming through.
So this might seem kind of confusing at this point, so let's clarify. Bert's father is Anthony, a.k.a. Tony, who passed away back in 1993. The grandfather with the BMW is on his mother's side of the family, and that's Jerry. So Bert's grandfather is Jerry. The person coming through right now is Jerry's father, Joseph, which is Bert's great-grandfather on his mother's side. You got it?
Now, at this point, so she's essentially giving me like a preliminary kind of reading, right? This was kind of like an introductory type thing, just to kind of tease me a little,
just to wet your whistle, let you know she's working with something.
So she goes, his father, Joseph, he's coming through. And I said, oh my goodness. And she goes, yeah. She goes, and he just says hello. And I said, all right. She goes, now you didn't send me any pictures or anything. And I said, yeah. I said, I haven't. I said a question about that. She goes, that's all right. She goes, what's the question? I said, I want to send the pictures, but I don't know whether to, because all psychics tell you, don't tell me anything ahead of time. And I said, all right.
So if you remember during the little talk that Tom and I had this whole plan about going to see a psychic and not giving them anything to work with and thinking I'd be sneaky and pull one over on them and being like, you can't cold read me. Well, what Bert just said right here about a good psychic not wanting any background information kind of rained on my parade a little bit.
They say, don't tell me anything ahead of time because that will basically compromise the authenticity.
Right, which makes sense.
People might think, okay, you told them that your name was John, that led to something else, you gave them too much.
Right.
Don't do that.
So that's kind of cool.
So, this is important to the story. I'm standing on the front lawn of my house, and I've got my cell phone. And the reason I'm on the front lawn is because my service is horrendous inside my house. And so, but I don't tell her that. And so she says to me, about your question about the pictures. I said, yeah. I said, listen, I'm about to send you pictures. I said, I want to know whether or not I should tell you on them who they are. Yeah, I said, and the circumstances surrounding that person. And I said, moreover, I said, I've got a father who passed. And she goes, oh, I know, Anthony. And I said, yeah. And she goes, yeah, he's coming through. And I started of course, it's an emotional thing. There's always emotion attached to this.
Of course.
And I started just to cry just a little. But it was not audible. She couldn't hear this. She goes, don't cry. Your father's telling me not to cry. Your father is telling me to tell you not to cry. And I go, and she goes, because he's standing next to you on the front lawn.
And she said on the front lawn.
On the front lawn. And that's exactly where I was. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. And she goes, we'll talk. Which I loved. So
she's a great businesswoman as well. Yeah, that was her pitch.
Exactly. Wow. So, ended up calling me on September the 7th.
So before we move on, so that was your first little taste.
That was my first taste of this. And now at this point, the 3 weeks, I am pumped. I'm like, let's do this.
Now, I have a few questions. One, I liked how you said you were a little skeptical about being on the phone with her as opposed to in person.
Right, yeah.
Because I always thought it's a very intimate thing. You know, you have this energy with you, the spirit of the person's attached to you. So I was like, over the phone seems a little weird.
Right.
And my own thoughts here are she nailed the names.
Nailed them.
But can she look that up, playing devil's advocate as to family lineage?
I'm sure she could.
But the thing she couldn't nail is the front lawn.
No.
And the fact that you were
and tracing the BMW thing would have been tough.
I was gonna say,
that would have been
she
would have had to do
car records
a
and
PI type, private investigator type thing, and that I don't think happened.
So she was a little close to home on her initial, just her teaser reading.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, when you put in the last name and you, I guess, can trace anybody's lineage to a certain degree. Right. But I don't think I'm important enough in the docket for her to do that.
Exactly.
Nor is there a satellite that's focused
exactly
on you.
Right on it. Google was not outside at the time.
That is the X factor to me, which it's not only is she just kind of saying some names of.
That's exactly
she's kind of getting the place. So then a few days later, she calls for your full-on reading.
So on the 7th, she calls and she said to me, I'm inside my house at this point, and it was crazy because as soon as I got to the phone, and it was just almost full energy, full on, right out of the gate, just starts nailing dates, birthdays, the whole thing. Did you just change majors? And I said, I did. Somebody's got a 15, a birthday that's around the 15th. That would be my brother. Now, somebody's got a 27 or 28 or 26 maybe. Oh, November 26th. That's my mom. Where are you getting these numbers from? And she goes, your father is coming through. I said, oh, okay. All right. So then she brings up, she goes, now, wait a second. She goes, your grandfather passed or your great-grandfather? And I said, great-grandfather. And she goes, okay, that's Joseph, right? And I said, yeah. And she says, okay, well, he's coming through and he just wants to say hello and make sure that, you talk to, you mentioned to your grandfather that he came through. I said, I can appreciate that. And she goes, now, is there and this is where it gets crazy. She goes, is there like a den area in your house? Like something that's like wood paneled? And I said, there is. She goes, are you in that room? I go, I'm not in that room. She goes, okay, there's a picture of you, your father, and your brother in that room. And I said, absolutely. And she goes, okay, your father's in that room. She goes, go to that room.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my goodness. So of course I go downstairs, go to the den. I go, I'm there now. She goes, okay. She goes, is there are you at like a house that's like by like a pond or like a lagoon or like a big body of water? And I said, I am. It's by a reservoir. She goes, okay. She goes, that's what I'm seeing. Absolutely. She goes, now, I feel like you've got a deep backyard and you've got like tree lines and there's a neighbor by the tree lines. I goes, well, there's 3 neighbors by the tree lines. I said, side, and back. She goes, okay. She goes, your father's now outside pointing by the tree lines to one of the neighbors. And I said, okay. She goes, she goes, he hates them. And I go, she goes, yeah, I guess that would be them. She goes, yeah, he's telling me they're no good. And I said, well, we really haven't talked to them in a while. She goes, yeah, you guys are kind of on the outs, kind of have like a turf war going on. I said, for sure. And I gave her a little bit of the backstory.
So she was right about that.
Right on about that. So she talks about the neighbors, and I said to her, I said, listen, I gotta tell you, I said, that's kind of an outdated thing. And it was outdated. We hadn't talked to him for about 10 years, but she still picked up on it.
Right.
So she says to me, she goes, all right. She goes, I feel like, she goes, did you shave? Like, did you have facial hair, but you shaved recently? I said, I did. I said, I had a goatee. And she goes, okay. She goes, your father had a mustache? And I said, right. She goes, so, but you no longer have facial hair? And I said, yeah. She goes, your father's telling me you look better without the facial hair. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. And so she goes, all right. She goes, your father's telling me that he likes the way you dress. She goes, you dress kind of conservatively, kind of smart. And I go, I don't want to say smart. I said, but yeah, a little bit more preppy. She goes, okay. She goes, I think your father likes the way you dress. Looks very professional. And then she goes, now, do you have like a sports car? And I said, I wouldn't call it a sports car. And she goes, well, it's sportier. There's an element to it that has some sport to it. I go, well, it's like a Honda Civic and it's got like a very cool spoiler on the back. She goes, okay, your father likes that car. And I said, oh, okay. And she goes, now it's important. He's telling me that it's important to tell you that the day that you and your grandfather were test driving the car, which was incidentally the same day your grandfather was teaching you how to drive, your father was in the back seat. And I went, that's crazy. And I said to her, I said, I recall the day vividly. I said, I was 15 and we were just going up and down the driveway.
Right.
Reverse forward, reverse forward. She goes, okay, so he likes the car.
Which is also interesting just because from my own personal knowledge of your father, he was a car guy.
Exactly.
And he had that great car.
Yes. So this would be something that he would be, of course, all into. She goes, did you just go on like a cruise, like within the last couple of months? And I said, yeah. I said, we actually went on a cruise out of New York City. I said, it was like a 2-day kind of thing. She goes, okay. She goes, your father's telling me he was on the trip. And so at this point, she says to me, she goes, seems like he's around a lot. Is that okay with you? Do you feel like you're being like kind of like stalked? And I said, you know what? I said, the more the merrier at this point. I said, yeah, it's least of my concerns. So this was interesting. She says, now, did you just look at a Mercedes to buy? And I said, no. I said, I can't afford a Mercedes. As you know, I explained to you, I said, I'm in college. She goes, but I feel like you just looked at a Mercedes. And I hadn't put it together at the time. But incidentally, I was about 3 weeks prior to the phone call in Cape May, and they were raffling off a Mercedes at the downtown district. And so that's what she was picking up on.
Interesting.
Which I didn't pick up on until later.
Right.
And it's important to note about all these medium type of scenarios. You usually pick up on things later. Somebody will mention, you have a person named Jamie or James in your life, and you go, nah, I don't. That's crazy. And then later you go, oh, well, this person was that, it connected to that person, and there was a James.
There's more time you have to think about it.
Exactly.
Put it together.
So that's important that, a lot of times it appears, especially on TV, that, oh, John Edward didn't come up with anything. That person didn't know what he was talking about. But that's only what you see on the cameras. You don't get to see the person afterwards when they go home and they really reflect.
Put the pieces together.
Right. And so she says to me, now I feel like there's something going on with the house right now. She's like, is your mom looking to sell? And I said, right, that's true. And she goes, okay, your father's telling me to hold on to the house. Don't sell. Hold on to it. Very important. Now, this is another element of kind of giving advice. And I think a lot of times when I think I mentioned previously, when people go to a medium, they're looking for a direction. And so this, to me, was the portion of the call where she's trying to provide me with some answers to some of my questions and offer some form of clarity.
As well as fatherly advice, such as, I like the way you dress, you look better without the facial hair.
Right. Things I wouldn't have been able to pick up on any other way, of course. So she goes, now I feel like the stress you have right now is directly related to school. Am I right? And I said, yes. She goes, now are you taking too many classes? And I said, yeah, absolutely. She goes, okay. She goes, you don't know what to get rid of. She goes, but you have to get rid of one of the classes. And she goes, and your father is telling me that one of the classes isn't working out. And she goes, is there like a teacher that like he says he's not a bad teacher and you're not a bad student, but you just don't jive? I go, that's exactly it. And she goes, list your classes. And I listed them. And the fourth one I listed was this environmental law course. She goes, that's the one. Almost like picking out a deck of cards.
Right.
Picked out the right card.
Right.
And she goes, dump it. She goes, immediately dump it. So sure enough, my first action after this phone call was going onto my computer and dumping that thing. And it turned out to be the right thing.
Right.
And it was the course that I was deliberating whether or not I should get rid of it. And I'm very glad I did. So, so at this point of the call, and this is why I say to people who are interested, in going to a medium, I think an hour is too long. I think 45 minutes is perfect. I've heard of other mediums doing 20 minutes. 45 minutes, 40 minutes is the perfect length because a 60-minute call, you get hit with a lot right in the beginning, and then it kind of trails off and it kind of dissipates.
Right.
And so at this point, she starts bringing up, kind of expanding on previous items. And it almost becomes like a conversation in the sense that it's not so much a conversation between a medium and a person who's going to a medium, but just two individuals.
So now she's just kind of following up with, how is school? How is this?
Exactly. That's exactly it. And so that's one of those things where you go, okay, well, I'm on the clock and I'm not getting anything out of this.
Right.
And even though she's a very intuitive person, just as a human, just as a lay person, she gives good advice. At this point, she's just kind of...
She's filling her time.
Filling her time. Exactly. And she comes out of the gate so hot that she kind of doesn't leave anything left for the 9th inning, 8th inning, 7th inning. So interestingly enough, then she picks up on personalities. And she goes, I feel like you have like a very overbearing mother. She goes, is that true? And I said, yeah. And I said, okay. I said, well, I have to tell you that the relationship is it's a tenuous relationship. And she says, okay. She goes, I'm seeing that. She goes, well, I'll tell you what it is. And this is important to mention. Sometimes when a medium, especially in this context, is telling you something, you can't tell whether it's a medium speaking or it's a human speaking. So sometimes throughout the phone call, I would have to say to her, now, is that what you're seeing from a celestial standpoint? Or is that what you're telling me from a singularly newcome human standpoint?
Right.
And she would have to tell me either way. She goes, this is from a celestial standpoint. She goes, what I'm telling you is that I think your mother is so hard on you, not only because of the way she was raised. She goes, but also, she goes, she obviously lost her husband and now she doesn't want to lose you, which is why you're so coddled. And I said, yeah, it feels like it's a little too much. I said, it's too much. And she goes, no, I can understand that. And she goes, your father's father is telling me. So your father's father is telling me that it was the way she was raised.
So Bert actually misspoke right here. What he meant to say was my grandfather's father.
And that's interesting to note because I hadn't heard from him in about 20 minutes from the phone call. So I guess he's still on the line. And so even though my father and my great-grandfather came through, and even though they come through and they're not mentioned consistently throughout the phone call, they're still on the horn.
Right.
It's almost like a conference call, and that's the best way I can describe it.
And they'll chime in from
time to time. So she basically summarizes the phone call, gives me direction going forward. And it's hard because at the end of the phone call, and I think many people feel this about a reading, it's not enough, you feel. You feel like you've been offered some type of clarity to a certain effect, but you're just not ready for the reading to end.
Right.
And I think a lot of people will feel this, and I know I definitely felt this. When the call ended, it was such a downer. It was almost like Christmas morning ending. And not only, I think there's a couple facets to that. Not only was number one, I'm very excited about the reading, but number two, I felt like I hadn't gotten enough clarity. And number three, this is like almost like a family reunion. And it's kind of like, these family reunions, and I think a lot of people do, once every 3 years. And then everybody's there, everybody's having a great time, and everybody leaves the driveway, and you're just left with like the mess to clean up, essentially. And you go, where did everybody go? And oh shit, I'm not going to see these people for 3 or 4 years, if ever. And in this case, it was an if ever. People can get very addicted to psychics and mediums for that reason. And let me backtrack. The reason it's smart to differentiate between a psychic and a medium.
I was actually going to ask you about this.
You have to differentiate.
On this.
A medium can connect with the dead. A medium can connect in some level with those who have passed. A psychic is somebody who is almost like a clairvoyant. Somebody who can look into a crystal ball and tell you what's going on right now and summarize the situation and tell you in 3 weeks this is going to happen, in 4 weeks this is going to happen. This person happened to be both.
And
not everybody is both.
We had discussed this before you arrived. So there's 3 types, we'll say. There's a medium, there's a psychic, and then there's the psychic medium who has both capabilities.
That is exactly it.
Which it sounds like the phone call you were on was with a psychic medium.
That is exactly it.
Okay.
And I think going back to ending a phone call or ending a reading and feeling like you didn't get enough, I've heard of people getting very addicted to these readings. And John Edward, I remember, told my mom, he has a general rule, which goes to show you his professionalism and his lack of greed for money. He will not see somebody again until a year has passed. And the reason he says that is, he goes, not only does it compromise the authenticity of my reading, because I just saw you, he goes, but I can't have this become a every week type of thing. You know, if you go to see a shrink, you go to see a doctor, that's the type of thing where maybe it would be beneficial. He goes, but every week that just can't happen just because there's not enough time that has passed.
Right. There's no new messages.
There's no new messages exactly yet. And we end up kind of repeating and digging back up the old stuff from the previous message.
Which you had found, even you said a 60-minute call was too much.
Even in my call. So given that she didn't give me a lot of direction in the sense that this is going to happen next Wednesday, there weren't a lot of things that I could point to and go, that's what she told me was going to happen. And I think if you go into these calls with that expectation that, hey, I'm telling you, next week there's going to be a subway that's going to come by, don't get on it. That does not happen. It's not that pinpointed. It's basically a general concept they provide you with of how to move forward. It's not like a situation where I've heard this, where people get into a car accident 3 or 4 weeks later, some time period later, and somebody goes, well, I can't believe the psychic didn't tell you about that. It's not that type of thing. They can't detect next Christmas you're going to get into an argument with this person. It's just not that.
Right. It's not that specific.
No, I mean, it's specific as far as pinpointing the people around you, right, pinpointing the situation, reading them, reading a past situation. But it's definitely not something where February 17th, you're going to meet the girl you end up marrying, right, or anything like that. So that's important.
The Brothers Mysterium.
All right, so we're going to cut it off right there. Bert will be back. We're going to continue that conversation in the next couple of episodes coming up. We sat down and talked to him for literally hours. We got a bunch of great content, but let's sort of reflect on what we heard in just this first bit. You got a lot of great advice for people, I'll tell you that much, that are interested in talking to mediums or calling mediums. He did help us separate between a medium, a psychic, and a psychic medium. So a lot of our questions from before we spoke with him were answered. But overall, what were your impressions of his first phone encounters with a medium?
I don't want to say too much because I know there's so much yet to come in his story, but I definitely found it very odd that she's able to nail so many things right off the bat. And you can hear it in Bert's voice where like he's just as shocked. And it's one of those things where I don't know.
It leaves you guessing, man.
Yeah, it hits you in that point in your brain where you're like, it's
hard to rationalize. It's hard to say, how could she have guessed this? How could she have known that?
Right. I can't even really put it into words.
Right. She gets a lot of specifics. So it's intriguing. It's crazy. And as we like to say here, it's a mystery. It's hard to decipher.
Yeah.
But he definitely has the hook in me. I'm interested to hear more, see what happens. So next time, next episode, we're definitely going to bring it back with the rest of our conversation with Bert.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next time on The Brothers Mysterium.
She's on concrete, she's bleeding, and there's sirens, and this is like almost like a crime scene.
Well, that's when you've crossed the line now from a private reading into more of showmanship, entertainment value.
And fraud.
Right, exactly.
And fraud.
Good thing neither of us died in between then and now, because we would have completely wiped out my Houdini test.
They're missing a leg. I go, missing a leg? I said, no.
That concludes part 1 of our talk with Bert and our discussion on mediums. The South Park clip about cold reading comes from episode 615, The Biggest Douche in the Universe. Give it a watch if you haven't seen it. The audio from Houdini's last seance comes to us from the Houdini Museum, which is located in Scranton, Pennsylvania. For more information on Harry Houdini, or just to check out the museum, go to www.houdini.org. That's the museum's official website. The sound bites of John Edward come to us from his show, Crossing Over, and also the Dr. Phil Show. The explanation of John Edward at the beginning of the episode comes from his personal site, johnedward.net. If you're interested, definitely go give that a look. And the audio of Miss Cleo comes from advertisements for the Psychic Readers Network. All the music you heard in this episode, including our theme song, was performed by The Nevergrin. Check them out at thenevergrin.com.
We'd also like to thank Gwen and Dan Hunsett for lending their voices to this episode. And as always, we invite you to join the discussion. Let us know what you think. Shoot us an email at thebrothersmysterium@gmail.com. You can tweet us at Mysterium Bros or reach us on Facebook, The Brothers Mysterium. Just search it, will pop up. And as always, let us know what you think of our episode. If you agree with us, disagree, if you have experiences you want to share, you want to be on the show, let us know. Or if you just have a topic you want to hear us discuss. We're always open, we're always listening. And as always, thank you for listening to us.